The ego doesn't always look arrogant or selfish. Sometimes it looks like constantly needing approval, constantly defending ourselves, feeling threatened by criticism, comparing ourselves to others, or struggling to let go of control. Sometimes it looks like pretending we're fine when we're not, trying to appear strong all the time, needing validation to feel worthy, or becoming upset when life doesn't go the way we expected. In spirituality, the ego is often spoken about as though it's the enemy. But the truth is usually much more complex than that. Hi, welcome to my channel, where we gently explore spirituality, inner growth, reflection, and reconnecting with ourselves. Today we're talking about the ego in the spiritual sense, what it actually is, why it develops, how it influences our thoughts and behaviors, and why spirituality is often less about destroying the ego and more about becoming aware of it. In spirituality, the ego is usually described as the part of us that identifies with the mind, the personality, and the identity we've created throughout life. It's the part of us that says, "This is who I am. This is what I believe. This is what I need. And this is how others should see me." The ego becomes attached to labels, achievements, opinions, appearances, roles, status, control, and even suffering. And while that might sound negative, the ego itself is not evil. It's simply part of the human experience. The problem begins when we become completely identified with it, when we believe we are only our thoughts, our fears, our emotions, our image, or our story. The ego often creates separation. It compares, competes, defends, reacts, judges, fears rejection, fears losing control, fears not being enough. And many of us spend years operating from the ego without even realizing it, because it can feel completely normal. The ego often develops as protection. As we grow up, we slowly learn which behaviors gain approval, which emotions feel unsafe to express, and what helps us feel accepted, loved, or protected. Over time, we build identities around those experiences. Maybe we became overly responsible because we had to grow up too quickly. Maybe we became people pleasers because conflict felt uncomfortable or unsafe. Maybe we built our self-worth around achievement, appearance, intelligence, spirituality, or being needed by others. The ego creates masks and defense mechanisms to protect us from pain, shame, rejection, embarrassment, vulnerability, or fear. And eventually, many of those patterns become automatic. We no longer notice them because they've become part of how we move through life. But spirituality often begins when we start becoming aware of those unconscious patterns instead of simply reacting from them. The ego is deeply connected to fear. It wants certainty, control, validation, safety. It often fears change because change threatens the identity it has become attached to. This is one reason spiritual growth can sometimes feel uncomfortable, because awakening often involves questioning parts of ourselves we once believed were permanent. Sometimes we begin noticing how much of our behavior is driven by fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of failure, fear of being judged, or fear of not being enough. And when those fears are triggered, the ego often reacts automatically. It may become defensive, controlling, emotionally reactive, competitive, withdrawn, or desperate for reassurance. And sometimes, without even realizing it, we may avoid certain feelings, truths, or situations because part of us is simply trying to feel emotionally safe. And that's something many of us do at different points in life. But awareness can slowly begin changing this. The more aware we become, the more gently we begin noticing our reactions, our fears, and the patterns we've been carrying unconsciously. One of the more difficult things about the ego is that it can even attach itself to spirituality. Sometimes we can begin identifying ourselves as more awakened, more conscious, or more spiritual than others. Sometimes spirituality itself becomes part of our identity. Our ego may begin seeking superiority through spiritual knowledge, spiritual practices, or certain beliefs. And this can happen very subtly. We may judge others for not being awake enough. We may become attached to appearing wise, peaceful, healed, intuitive, or evolved. But true spiritual growth usually creates more humility, not superiority. Because the deeper we go into self-awareness, the more we often realize how human we all are. None of us are completely free from fear, emotional wounds, conditioning, or unconscious patterns. And recognizing that can actually create more compassion for ourselves and for others. One of the clearest signs we're operating from ego is reactivity. We may notice that we instantly feel defensive when criticized, feel the need to always be right, constantly compare ourselves to others, seek validation to feel worthy, take everything personally, or struggle to admit mistakes. Sometimes the ego also appears through control, trying to control outcomes, control how others see us, or control situations so we can avoid discomfort or uncertainty. And sometimes the ego can even hide beneath self-doubt, because constantly thinking about how inadequate we are is still a form of self-focus. The ego is not always loud confidence or arrogance. Sometimes it's fear, insecurity, overthinking, or attachment to identity. The important thing is not judging ourselves for these patterns. It's simply learning to notice them with honesty and awareness. In spirituality, people often talk about killing the ego, destroying the ego, or ego death. But for most people, that idea can actually create more inner conflict. The goal is not to hate ourselves or reject our humanity. The goal is observation and awareness. To notice when fear is driving us, to notice when we're becoming reactive, to notice when we're seeking validation, acting from insecurity, or becoming attached to identity. Because once we become aware of those patterns, we begin making more conscious choices instead of simply operating unconsciously. We begin responding more consciously instead of reacting automatically. And over time, we may feel less controlled by fear, comparison, defensiveness, or the constant need to prove ourselves. Not because the ego completely disappears, but because we no longer believe every thought, emotion, or reaction it creates. We begin understanding that we are not our thoughts, emotions, beliefs, or actions. We are far greater than that. The ego is not something to fear or hate. It's part of being human, part of our identity. It has helped us survive this far. But spirituality often invites us to move beyond survival and into greater awareness. And that awareness can slowly help us reconnect with something deeper beneath the conditioning, beneath the masks, and beneath the constant need to defend who we think we are. Because sometimes growth begins the moment we stop automatically identifying with every thought in our mind and simply start observing ourselves with more honesty, compassion, and awareness. Until next time, love yourself deeply. If this resonated with you, please like the video and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy this kind of content, please consider subscribing. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. See you in the next one.